It's just very, very sad.
They sit stranded on police department shelves all over the state. Hundreds of sexual assault kits complete with DNA samples that may never be analyzed.
He beat me up, he sodomized me.
This local woman, whose identity we'll protect, was raped 10 years ago by a man who broke into her home. The DNA evidence that could hold the key to catching her attacker has never been examined.
My reaction, I was just horrified. This is a stranger who comes into your house. This is a stranger who threatens your life and threatens your family. And this is the case that they won't check the kit.
Right now we have 5 qualified DNA analysts to handle the entire state of North Carolina.
The SBI Molecular Genetics Unit in Raleigh puts murders, police shootings, and crimes with suspects in jail at the top of its DNA testing list. But because of the limited staff to do the tests, most cases without suspects never make it through the door.
We have asked agencies, if you don't have a clue as to who the suspect is, don't bother to submit it. And so there are thousands of cases out there in local police departments across the state that are not being addressed. And we're not giving them justice right now. It's eating at myself and all the staff up here.
If the crime lab accepted every case, Agent Mark Nelson estimates it would push the DNA wait to well over a year. Not only would testing slow to a snail's pace, but some innocent suspects could be left in jail.
And it's just a cold, cruel fact that if you don't have resources to jump on every single case right now, you just have to do the best you can.
To get a comparison, we came here to Richmond. The state of Virginia has about 1 million fewer people than North Carolina, but there are far more state DNA analysts here, and they get far more results.
We can't say no to any case.
According to state Medicaid billing, psychologist Eunice Gadabaki works long hours.
Hi, Dr. Gadabaki.
Impossibly long hours. In these state billing records obtained by WRAL Investigates, Dr. Gadabaki's name is linked to 22,984 hours of therapy last year. Keep in mind, there are only 8,800 hours in an entire year. The state paid out $1.79 million in Medicaid money for Dr. Gadabaki alone.
We're with WRAL TV. I'd like to talk to you about your Medicaid billing. Can you talk to us? According to the state records, you billed $1.8 million last year. That averages more than 60 hours a day. How is that possible?
We finally caught up with Dr. Gadabaki after leaving messages at Amani Psychological Services, her Wake Forest-based agency. We went to her house.
Would you like to say anything? We just want to make sure we're as fair as possible.
Days later, her attorney contacted us. Brian Crawford concedes, of course Dr. Gadabaki didn't work those impossible hours, and she didn't get all that money either. He explains the doctor was hired by Rehoboth Consulting of Raleigh to oversee provisionally licensed providers. He says she signed off on therapy provided by other counselors, which these records reflect.
But here's the problem. According to the state, providers listed in these billing statements must personally provide that service.
In a statement, Gadabaki says there may have been some bills inadvertently billed under my provider number. Her attorney points out Rehoboth filed the reports.
My name is Cullen Browder. I'm with WRAL TV.
We called and sent emails looking for an explanation. So we went to get Rehoboth's side in person.
Who from Rehoboth can I talk to?
This woman came out. She tried to avoid us.
We're with WRAL.
By going in the passenger door, then climbing over to the driver's seat.
Can I give you a card?
The state wants answers about the billing as well. DHHS sent this letter on May 4th suspending Rehoboth's Medicaid payments because the agency determined a credible allegation of fraud exists for which an investigation is pending. At the height of flooding in Wayne County following Hurricane Matthew, a trooper chose to stay at home and collect a paycheck. WRAL Investigates spent months keeping an eye on patrol veteran Sergeant Maurice Duvall. We confirmed at least 4 incidents where Duvall called in to say he was on duty in Wayne County, yet we found his cruiser at his home in southeast Raleigh. After we took our surveillance to the patrol, they launched an internal investigation. Within 4 days, Duvall was placed on administrative duty and his patrol vehicle taken away. 9 months later, he was officially fired. In this termination letter obtained by WRAL, the Highway Patrol accused Duvall of insubordination, violating the patrol's residency policy because he lived too far from his duty station, neglecting his duties, and reporting false information to the state's payroll system. In the end, Duvall was fired for violating 2 Highway Patrol policies. We went to Duvall's house twice during our investigation for a response. We delivered a letter with details of our story, asking for his side. A relative who answered the door had no comment.
We're trying to be as fair as possible, give them every opportunity to talk to us. So all I can do is try.
The termination letter shows the same day we tipped off the patrol, Duvall's boss went to his house and found Duvall there 4.5 hours after he was supposed to be on duty. Duvall told the lieutenant he went home sick. But Eric Hooks, the secretary of the Department of Public Safety, wrote, quote, "I find your excuse without any credibility whatsoever." The patrol also analyzed Duvall's check-in and check-out times on other days and found he falsified timesheets for extra hours worked. One case where he got paid for 10 hours of work, he admitted to internal affairs he never even left home. Finally, the patrol found Duvall was supposed to work 8 shifts between September 22nd and October 6th of last year. Simply driving to and from work on those days should have put at least 702 miles on his cruiser. Duvall reported driving 767 miles to cover his tracks. However, fuel logs for his cruiser show it was only driven 292 miles, showing he couldn't have worked more than half of his scheduled shifts. The DPS secretary wrote, quote, "Mathematically, you could not have gone to the office on more than 3 occasions during this period of time." In summarizing Duvall's pattern of calling in, staying home, and falsifying timesheets, the termination letter concludes the trooper embarrassed the Highway Patrol, and his actions were, quote, "inconsistent with the expectations of the patrol and the taxpayers of North Carolina. Because of your untruthfulness, your credibility has become impaired." Spread across the state, motor fleet vehicles travel more than 100 million miles a year. But our investigation found state agencies often pay to go nowhere. Department of Correction records showed this dust-covered Ford Taurus in Greenville wasn't driven for 5 months in the last fiscal year. Still, the department paid more than $2,000 for a car that never moved. That car wasn't alone. From July of 2008 through June of 2009, the DOC paid approximately $1.7 million for miles never driven.
When you hear $1.7 million for vehicles that are basically in park, what's your reaction?
It certainly sounds like something that we could take a look at and see if there are ways to improve that.
I just don't have sense to me that he's dead until I remind myself that he's not here.
February 9th, Gloria Faison lost a part of herself. Her 67-year-old husband, Tommy, died in the emergency room at Betsy Johnson Regional Hospital in Dunn. Although he stayed active, Mr. Faison was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 1999 and had a history of heart troubles. That afternoon, he went to the emergency room with chest pains. After checking in around 12:40, Mrs. Faison says a triage nurse took his temperature and recorded he had high blood pressure. Then they were sent back to the waiting room, where they did just that, wait. Mrs. Faison says while at least 2 other patients who arrived after them were taken back, her husband's pains worsened.
He kept saying, "Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy."
Desperate, she says she kept asking nurses for help and met resistance.
I said, "And you took 2 people in front of him." She said, "Miss, I ain't taking nobody back there. I haven't did nothing." And she opened up the door and she got to hollering and screaming. And
finally, after nearly 2.5 hours of waiting, Mrs. Faison says her husband was wheeled back for an EKG.
And I began to shake him. And it was like he was going out. And I said, Tommy, what's the matter?" And so he didn't never say nothing.
Around 5 o'clock, Mrs. Faison says the attending physician pronounced her husband dead of a massive heart attack.
I just broke down because they let him wait too long in the emergency room, and that's what I was telling them.
When Mrs. Faison came out of the emergency room, she was approached by 3 people in the waiting room, 3 complete strangers who offered their condolences and also offered to corroborate her version of what happened.
I actually thought he was going to fall on the floor dead before somebody even actually showed any concern at all.
Veronica Morrison was one of those strangers.
I think that there are some nurses over there that are in the wrong profession. I mean, I've carried my dog to the vet before and got better attention.
I think they should have went ahead and took him back, straight back to the back. And I think they might possibly could have saved him. I don't think he was done right at all.
Complicating the pain, Mrs. Faison picked up her husband's death certificate a few days later. It had prostate cancer as the cause of death, with ischemic cardiomyopathy or heart disease as a secondary factor. Tommy Faison's primary care physician, Dr. Manuel Lopez, signed the document. Dr. Lopez also serves as Betsy Johnson's medical director.
It sounded like a cover-up to me. And Dr. Lopez was not in the emergency room when my husband passed.
I was not trying to protect the hospital. I was just trying to do my professional duty.
Dr. Lopez claims he knew nothing of the questions over Mr. Faison's care when he signed the document.
Anytime there's an allegation that concerns me, I want it fully investigated, of course.
Our stage lockout starts with a phone call.
I'm trying to reach somebody to let me in my house. I'm locked out.
Darla, a Wade County resident, calls SOS Locksmith, a company with prominent internet ads.
It's $35 service call plus labor.
Awaiting the locksmith arrival, we set up several hidden cameras in places like a parked van, a basket, and inside the home.
Our typical locks that you see in all your residential houses.
We asked Paul Atkinson, a licensed Raleigh locksmith, to size up the situation. With only the doorknob locked from the inside, he tells us a legitimate locksmith would likely get Darla in for under $100.
It should be pretty easy to pick.
Then we wait. And within about 30 minutes, a white, unmarked van with a Tennessee license tag pulls up.
Good morning.
Two men in street clothes, no uniforms, get out. They survey the situation, but make no mention of picking the lock.
You have to drill it.
Then that $35 service fee quickly increases.
$180.
Yeah.
Although only the doorknob is locked, the man first proceeds to drill the deadbolt.
If the other part wasn't locked, then you wouldn't have needed to break my lock.
Yeah.
But we didn't know if it was locked or not.
It was locked.
It was locked?
Then the men drill the doorknob. They open the door. The problem now, Darla has two damaged locks, and she's told they're special.
Mine's a high secure lock.
And the price keeps climbing.
So then it's a different amount now. It's additional, so we're talking more money again.
With different charges flying, Darla insists on adding them up with a calculator. Suddenly, the bill tops $400.
Okay, $404.98.
At that point, we jump out to get involved in the conversation.
My name's Cullen Browder. I'm with WRAL TV. Just want to talk to you about the work you're doing here.
Considering the information from our locksmith, I ask how the bill ballooned. And with barely a word, the so-called locksmiths pack up.
I just want to ask you a few questions. Do you have a license?
They load into their unmarked van.
It just seems deceptive that she was quoted one price, now it's more than $400.
And drive away without collecting any money. The men leave behind two drilled-out locks.
So you feel like you're pressured into paying his price. That's outrageous.
And one frustrated customer.
A couple of slime buckets. Just made me angry to think somebody could come in and take advantage of you like that.